Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Keeping the Wealth, where we talk to successful people about maintaining their wealth today, tomorrow, and long into the future. My co-host here is Hillary. Hillary, thank you very much for joining us again. Good to see you.
Hi.
And we have Cody and Jeff. Cody and Jeff, thank you very, very much for stopping by. We appreciate you guys. Question, how did your family get into the real estate business?
Well, thank you, one, for having us here. It's a pleasure to chat with you, and I don't know we'll have much to offer, but we'll try. So my dad was an advertising executive at BBDO in San Francisco, and we lived in Piedmont. He hated the city, hated commuting, and he wanted to be a cowboy. So he was the idiot city slicker who bought 12 acres, 4 miles from town, up here in St. Helena. We're in the Napa Valley, a mile from the closest people, and he paid $1,000 an acre. And everybody laughed at us because nobody would pay more than $900 an acre. It's now sort of $800,000 an acre. But at any rate, this was 1957. And he really wanted to be a cowboy, but he couldn't do that. So he started a little real estate company called James Warren, which eventually became James Warren and Son when I took it over in 1987. But his whole deal, when he retired from the advertising, they gave him a cowboy hat. And so that was his logo. And so on all his cards and on all his signs,
Awesome.
this cowboy hat.
Oh, wow.
Because we did mostly country property, vineyards, building sites, ranches and land. And then, of course, we did estates and all that stuff. But that's how the real estate company started.
That's beautiful. So it's three generations of real estate business.
Well, you didn't mention that, but yes, Cody is my daughter.
I've just come on board about I got my license 4 years ago, but I used to work in the office in high school and middle school and for $8 an hour during the summers. So I've been around a long time.
Wow.
Perfect.
Hillary,
So, how has the value escalated since your father started the business?
Well, as I said, my father bought this ranch, but they laughed at us at $1,000 an acre. And actually, in 1959, a vineyard sold for $1,000 an acre in town, and everybody said you can't. All the farmers said anything over $900 an acre, you can't make it. Now, I should say, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but vineyard land is like all agricultural land, whether it's tomatoes or onions or cotton or whatever. It tends to sell at 10 or 12 times the net that you get for it. Well, vineyard land now up here can go as high as 800,000. It's certainly going to hit $1 million an acre
Really
at
nice.
a certain point. So the escalation has been tremendous, but also what's happened is the housing thing. I mean, my wife and I, when we moved back here in 1987, I grew up here as a kid, obviously. Then I was in New York for 11 years as a copywriter. But anyway, when we moved back here, there were two houses. There was Freddie Behringer's house, Behringer Winery, and Freddie was a high school hero, a little bit older than me, and had a hot car. And his house had a pool table, and it was in a subdivision. And I wanted to buy that house, and my wife wanted to buy the home we're in right here, which is an 1880. Well, it was a tract house in 1880. But it's a Queen Anne Victorian, and you sent away to Sears and Roebuck and you bought it. And we bought it for $305,000 in 1987. And it's now, I don't know, it's been assessed at over $6 million. So the housing thing has gone way up, as well as the vineyard thing.
Amazing. Well, now, what makes Napa Valley agricultural land more expensive than land in the rest of California?
Well, the reason, I mean, as I said, all agricultural land is the same. It's a business. You're going to pay 10 or 12 times. So let me go back a bit. When I took over in 1987, my father was running the business, and vineyard land was $30,000, $25,000, $40,000 an acre.
Planted.
Planted land, pardon me, land that was planted. And then plantable land was about $10,000 or $15,000 an acre less, because that's what it cost to plant it. Well, we had this rush in the late 80s, all this Mike Milliken, hot money, YPO money, and everybody wanted something in the Napa Valley, and they all had the same number, $1.2 million. That was the number they spent. That was also true in Nantucket and in Hawaii. And that was just the given number for a second home for people. And they all wanted the same thing, 10 to 20 acres in the Disneyland belt from Yountville to St. Helena, with a pool and a court and a house with a wraparound porch. Well, pretty soon, of course, that product didn't exist. So people would say, okay, find me a piece of dirt for $500,000 or $600,000. I'll build a 3,000 square foot house for $150 a foot back then. Another $450,000. I'll put in a pool and a court for $100,000 and carrying costs. Boom, you're right back at $1.2 million. So that little 7-acre parcel that my dad would sell for $30,000 an acre, 210,000. I don't mean to be so fast, but just to give you an idea here, all of a sudden jumped to 600,000. There was a premium of about 400,000 for the ability to build. That's unique in Napa County because we're in an ag preserve and there's only so many parcels, about 5,000, a little more than that, parcels in the county. So the ability to build, right when I got here, and I didn't have anything to do with it, but it became, it established a premium. So instead of that $7,000 an acre, instead of being 210,000, it was 210,000 plus 400, around $500,000 or $600,000. And that exists today, except now it's somewhere between $1.5 million and $2.5 million. So the wineries go crazy because they want a multiple of what the net is from the income, but now they're stuck having to pay $2 million for a building site. So it's a big problem, but that's the market. That's the way it goes.
That's not a bad seller though, huh?
I beg your pardon?
Not a bad problem if you're the seller.
No, that's true.
Very nice. So, how important is the legacy when it comes to selling real estate?
Well, we had a very unique thing because my father's father was Chief Justice Earl Warren. And so he had a famous name, not only as being Chief Justice in the Warren Commission and all that stuff, but for honor and integrity. And of course, my dad had that. And when he was in business here, he was very slow. I mean, he would have hated it today, with the internet and all that stuff. But he was like a switch watchmaker. I mean, he was slow and methodical, and he'd take somebody out on a property and they'd say, let's buy it. And he'd send the offer down on a Friday and blame the mails or something because he wanted to make it absolutely perfect. But he was just so honest and so decent that everybody wanted to do business with him. So I tried to carry that on, and I know Cody has definitely so far carried that on. So
very nice. Yeah.
The legacy, the Warren name, of course, has been very helpful. No question about that. That's just accident of birth. But the reputation for being deliberate and slow and completely transparent, and everybody knows everything that we're doing and what happens, and that just builds business. The honesty thing is I got everything I got from my father, and hopefully Cody will get everything she's got from her father. But
except maybe your nose.
Yeah, except the nose. That's true. Anyway, that's I can't tell you how much it means in real estate because there's a lot of flakes in this business.
Totally, and a bad name travels fast. So
yes.
Let me get Cody to chime in here a little bit. Cody, what do you think attributed most to the success of your real estate business here?
I would have to say, I mean, the way that we brand ourselves is sort of 3 generations of knowledge in the Valley, and just really knowing every nook and every cranny in this Valley. Growing up here, my dad grew up here, and so we are able to know, where it's too hot or where it's too cold or where, there's no water or where there was a fire or where somebody tried to build or, there's, where there's a spring that nobody knows about when somebody says there's no water. So it's all really about knowledge in the Valley. And my dad has a great story about a friend of his from college.
Well, when Cody came into the business, she said, Pop, that's what we've got to do. 3 generations of knowledge. And because we always said, or my father used to say, we don't sell land, we sell knowledge. They throw in the land for free. And the classic example was my buddy from college. We're looking for homes up here. This is many years ago, the 80s. And he calls me on the phone and said, "Now, I don't want you to get upset, but we saw an ad in the paper and we're going to buy a house on Howell Mountain Road. My wife saw it and we made an offer and they've accepted it." I said, "Oh man, be careful. I used to ride my bike through there when I was a kid and there's frost and it's freezing cold in the winter." And he said, "Oh, Warren, you're just ticked off because you're not going to get a commission." I said, "No, I'm just telling you, that's the truth." Well, we remained friends. They came over for Christmas that year. And his wife says, "Well, Jeff, you told me it was going to be cold, but you didn't tell me we'd find a rat frozen in our swimming pool."
Yeah. So things like that. Areas, different locations, different parts of the town. There's a lot to know.
What set you apart from other realtors?
I would say this one, though, and this came from my grandfather that was passed on for me, was really like my dad said about, honesty, integrity. But one of the biggest rules is not shopping offers, which is something that we see a lot in the industry. People get an offer in and they like to shop it around and see if they can do something better. And my dad taught me that if you get an offer, you present the offer and you don't shop it around, it's just bad business, and people appreciate the offers that come in, and that's a really easy way to lose one and to lose trust. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I would say sets us apart.
It helps us to get people to make offers because this is big money up here. Everything's in the $1 million range and so forth. To have respect for the person who steps up to the plate and makes the offer and say, if you're going to come up and offer $3.5 million, don't worry, we're not going to use you as a stalking horse and go out and shop it. Now, a lot of sellers say, well, I want you to shop it, go and do this. But the way to encourage people to make offers, in my opinion, is to not go out and shop it and to let them know that there's that respect for what they're going to do. And it has certainly paid off. But a lot of people disagree with me.
But I think that gives a certain amount of comfort in the community, and I would think that the word travels fast, and I'm sure that everybody knows that they can trust you. So, how did you guys get involved with selling vineyards and wineries?
Well, when we came up here, as I said, my dad wanted to be a cowboy, and he was selling land mostly. And he literally, in fact, I got stuck in the mud on Saturday on a ranch in a truck. And the people that were looking at the ranch have horses. And I told them, I said, my dad literally had a sack on his back with aerials, and he literally showed property on horses back in the 60s occasionally. And I wish we'd have shown this place on a horse because we got stuck in the mud. At any rate, the three farmers, I'll make this short. In the old days, there was Mondavis and Martinis and Beckstoffer. Well, Beckstoffer was a grower. I mean, the wineries, there were half a dozen Beaulieu, Behringers, half a dozen major wineries, or you had to sell to a co-op. And these three farmers came to my dad and said, we want to have our own winery. And this was not done back in the early 60s. So they ended up buying Freemark Abbey for $100,000, which was just 6 acres and a couple of buildings, stone buildings. And Freemark Abbey had been a winery back before Prohibition. And then it was early 60s. And one of the farmers, Bill Yeager, said to my dad, Jim, we don't have the 6%. By the way, we did a lot of buyer's commissions on this stuff. We don't have the 6%, the $6,000 to pay you. You're going to have to take 6% of the winery. And my mother said, don't do that. Get the money. We didn't come up here to go broke in the wine business. Well, my dad wanted to be in the wine business. So he took 6% of the winery, which was the greatest financial decision he ever made. And that's how we got started. And of course, being part owners, and I became a partner in the winery. I mean, and we just learned the business minorly well.
Well, that's great.
Very, very nice. So how do you price the vineyard land in Napa Valley? I know you kind of talk a little bit about, but how can you price it at the today market?
Well, again, I think we've sort of covered this, but if you're trying to get, all wineries will pay 10 or 12% of what the net is on a vineyard. And then you have to give something for plantable land. And now, if you used a round number, if you said vineyard land now is $300,000 an acre, it costs, you can do it for $40,000, but it costs $60,000 to $80,000 an acre to to plant it. So what you try to do is figure what the net is off the plantable land. And you have to divide it from plantable, planted. I meant to say the net off the planted land, pardon me. Plantable, planted, and then there's wasteland that you can't do anything with. It's just trees or hills or grazing. You know, you can graze cattle.
There are a lot of rules and regulations on how slopes you can plant on and where you can plant on, how much of your parcel you can plant on. So is a lot there.
It's very difficult. And so anyway, you get that, and then you got to throw in that building site quotient, which I was talking about earlier. So if you had, to make it easy, if you had 10 acres and it was 300,000 planted and it was 300,000 an acre, that would be $3 million. And then you'd have to throw in $1.5 million or 2 million for the ability to build. So that's what separates it again, like from Paso Robles or Temecula or any other of these agricultural area, the Central Valley. I mean, my friend John Harris, that's Harris Ranches, he can't believe it because they just do it right on their, $35,000, $40,000 an acre, and we're $300,000 and $400,000 an acre. It's quite different.
And it also depends a lot on the varietal.
Yes,
So
that's true.
we are saying Cabernet Sauvignon is up to
$9,000 a ton last year. So theoretically, if you had $9,000 a ton, call it $10,000 a ton, and you got 5 ton an acre, that would be $500,000. And it cost you $20,000 an acre to farm it. So you have to work it out that way, and then add on that darn building price cost.
Well, here's
And then you also, of course, then if there is an existing house that has some improvement, that's on a square foot basis. It could be $800 a foot, $1,000 a foot, $200 a foot, whatever.
Well, here's a nice simple question for you guys. How does somebody make a small fortune in the wine business?
You always start with a big one, and that's how you make a small fortune. It's a very difficult business. People come up here and think, oh, I'm going to drive my tractor and I'm going to have my daughter on my lap and we're going to drive around into this. It's hard. You got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning at frost season or 3 in the morning to go out, and we used to light smudge pots, but now it's they use whirlybirds. But at any rate, a water. It's really hard. And if you're a winery, if you're pushing it through the bottle and you're making it, everybody says, well, I've got my Christmas card list and I'll just sell to all my friends on the Christmas card list. That runs out real fast. And you have to have marketing people and you have to have distributors. And when you sell it through distribution, if it's $1,200 a case, you only make $600 a case. That's saying $100 a bottle, 12 bottles, $1,200. You get only half of that. If you sell it to your Christmas card list, you get the whole $1,200, but you have all these marketing expenses and all that. It's just very, very difficult. And it's a cliche, but the way to make a small fortune in the wine business is to start with the big one. It's hard.
Exactly. And then tell the government about your small fortune and it's gone completely.
That's right.
Hillary, what's our next question?
What's role do celebrity play in Napa Valley real estate?
Well, Cody's got all the celebrities now because her good friend is head of we don't want to get into personal names, but one of the big sports agencies down in LA. So we've had lots of people up here. Start with the local celebrities, which would be the Mondavis and the Martinis and the Coppolas, Francis Ford Coppola. I'll give you one quick story. Robin Williams came into my office when he was alive, God rest his soul, and he had 600 acres up here on Wall Road, and he was looking for he wanted to be up at the end of a dead end road because he liked to skip and go naked and not be around other people. So we go out looking at this ranch, and we're driving in my Jeep, and he starts to riff and go through his whole routine. And so he's because it was February and all the vines had been pruned and they look like soldiers out there with their canes spread out. And he starts, at ease, soldiers, blah, blah, blah. And he's going through this whole thing. And we drove over a little branch and it kicked up and hit the side of the Jeep. And I turned to him and I said, "It looks like the troops are rebelling." And he looked at me like, he's very nice, very humble. "I do the jokes, you do the driving." It was very funny. But
Very nice.
we fed people like him, basketball players, a bit. We actually, I mean, Ellen DeGeneres, I shouldn't go through the names. And they had, this valley has always been that way when you go back to the Mondavis and the Martinis and so forth. It's always had a bit of panache. Because back in the 60s, I mean, we were really a cattle town. I mean, this was dusty and dirty. It was like Turlock. But we had the panache and the sophistication of the wineries, which always added a bit. And Cody's contacts and everything down in LA and with the basketball people and all that. We haven't hit the big one yet. I mean, LeBron James just bought a $10 million house and we were not involved in that. But
And Scottie Pippen just partnered with their neighbors next door. And there's there's a lot of athletes that are getting involved and a lot of famous celebrities that have places up here or want to have places up here, which is.
yeah, I mean, I literally got a call from Lance Armstrong in a car with Sheryl Crow, and I was at a Cal football game. He said, "We want to buy a place in Pope Valley." Boom. Unfortunately, they broke up and that never happened, but it does happen. It's a thing up here.
Well, what about another thing is me and Leonardo DiCaprio were on his private jet the other day talking about global warming, and we were wondering what does climate change, how's that affecting your area?
Well, the question is whether you believe it or not. The climate, well, to give you this much, we've had two major forest fires in 2017 and 2020. And those fires they've decimated the hillsides, and it's really affected fire insurance for homes. So here we are, a valley, I mean, we got a valley floor and then everything's in the hills. I grew up in the hills, people grew up in the hills. People are scared to buy in the hills now. They're just, excuse me. One, they're scared. They don't want a tree to fall across the road and not let them get out. And two, the fire insurance is extraordinary. Cody, what was that thing about your house up there in Angwin?
It was for to insure up to $1 million was going to be, I believe, like $16,000 a year.
Oh my
dollars a quarter, and that's just for
Mhm.
$1 million
Yeah.
is not anything. So up here you've got, and right now the California Fair Plan is only insuring up to $3 million. So we've got all these 9, 10, 15, $20 million homes that can only get insured up to $3
So if you
million.
believe
So,
climate
yeah.
change is responsible for that, which it may or may not be, it's probably not the climate change, it's probably the overgrown forests, which haven't been, we don't graze cattle anymore, and we don't trim the forest the way we used to when I was young. But that is definitely affecting things. Secondly, theoretically, we're getting warmer, and that would change the style of grapes. In other words, excuse us. The valley starting from the bay, coming up in from what's called Carneros up through Napa, Yountville, Oakville, Rutherford, St. Helena, Calistoga, it gets hotter as you come up because there's the ocean breezes. Well, if that continues and it gets hotter, there'll be very little white wines and Pinot Noirs that would change. But except for the fire insurance, I'm not sure it's really, and that's a perceived effect. Whether it's real or not, I couldn't tell you.
Good,
I
okay.
can tell you, but you
Yeah,
wouldn't
don't
believe
get
me.
Jeff started on the
Yeah.
water, the abundance of water that
That's right.
we have that they swear we don't.
Well, it's
So,
stopped raining for an hour, so I think Gavin Newsom is going to say there's another drought.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's see, Hillary, did you have a question?
yeah, so let's go back to we talk about climate change, we talk about other stuff. How did the COVID affect your business, your wine business, and also the real estate business?
COVID. So
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
mean, the effects on he can talk a little more about the effects on the wine business. The home sales really shot up. COVID was really good for home sales up here, and especially the draw from people from the Bay Area, San Francisco, Silicon Valley. We have seen a huge surge of tech people and people from the city of Silicon Valley who can now work from home. And it's a lot of people who rented up here during COVID and got, 2-month, 3-month, 4-month rentals, and then decided they loved it and decided to stay, or decided that they realized they can work from home now, and why would they move back to the city? So we see a lot more
Right.
second homes and a lot more sort of Silicon Valley money up here, which when I was growing up, it was generational money, whereas now it's the flashy cars and the new money, which is really entering sort of the community and the schools, which is a good thing. I think it's a great thing for the Valley.
Yeah, all Cody's friends, and they've got young children, and those that moved. And the high tech thing I always thought was a bit of a lie up here. They were saying Silicon Valley, but boy, with COVID, it really. I used to say there's only 10 or 12 people that were. There were some big names that were here, but still. Anyway, now there's quite an influx, and they're nice kids. They're good.
And what about
people.
the wine business?
Well, in the wine business, of course, they all want to. What's the question? Oh, how COVID affected
Yeah.
the wine business.
Yeah.
Well, the wine business actually went up during COVID. I mean, people were day drinking. So their sales increased, but we had they decreased with the restaurants, of course, because the restaurants weren't open. So that affected them. So we've had a little shock. There was the wine business is always all about inventory, because you have to store wine for 5 to 7 years, and then you have to sell it, and that's a cost when you're not making any money. And then the price of grapes is all amount of how much inventory do you have backed up there, and
You need new tanks, and people
so
run out of tanks. And
we had for example, at this moment right now, wineries are overstocked. They have too much wine. They've got to get rid of it. They're not out buying grapes at the rate they were. There's $9,000 a ton for cab last year. It'll probably drop $100, $150, $200 a ton in this coming harvest. And that's the cycles we just always go through, whether there's a shortage of wine or a glut of wine. And that always affects the prices that the wineries are going to. And they enter into 3 to 5 to 10-year contracts with these vineyard owners, and they pay Napa Valley average plus 10%. So if last year's Napa Valley average was $9,000, next year the cost of the grapes will probably be $9,900, 10%. But it's always a reflection of how much inventory is backed up, or how much sometimes they need grapes. I mean, when Trump's tax cuts came, the wineries, when it went from 35 to 21%, they had all this extra money. They were buying up land in the late teens, like 1919, 1920, 1918, 2018. Enormous. That was the biggest influx of or activity in the wine business we've ever had.
It's that, and he's talking about tax cuts 2.0. So
Yeah.
2.0.
Let's hope so.
okay, why did you guys move from a boutique shop to a larger firm?
Well, I hate it, but when 2008 came, we really got hit, because I mean, James Warren and Son, we were the biggest and the best. I mean, there was a Coldwell Banker and these various other firms, but because of my father, and we had about 5 people working for us, and the 2 of us, and through the 90s, we would alternate with another office about who would sell the most. But by the time 2008 came on, we really got hit, and it coincided with the high-tech revolution and the online stuff. And even though we were one of the first to ever have a website, you go on a listing presentation and they say, well, how many hits did you get? And we said, well, we got 150 hits last month. They'd say, well, Golden Gate Sotheby's got 10,000 hits last month. And it just, the perception in the marketplace was that we were just not big enough and didn't get enough access. The perception wasn't accurate, because actually what happens is everybody comes into the Valley, and they might be working with other brokers, but all the brokers are going to work with us. So we would still get access to them, but the perception just killed us. So we were fortunate.
also needed more international reach,
Yes.
and everything moved online, and everything became, social and international, and my dad had or still has a weekly ad in the newspaper, but people are trying to kill that off as well. So we needed some help staying online.
What is the biggest change you have seen in the valley over the last 3 of your generations?
Well, we were in the 60s when we came up here, late 50s. This was a dusty, rusty cow town. Cattle was the biggest crop in the Napa Valley until 1967, bigger than grapes. Walnuts and prunes were next. Grapes was like third or fourth. In the wine boom started, my dad always said started about around 1970 when Hoobline paid $4,000 an acre for plantable land on the keg ranch. At any rate, and then once the wine boom came, all of a sudden we're like the most profitable agricultural crop probably in the country. And with the wine boom came financing and corporations to capitalize on that. So all of a sudden we had corporations coming in, Hoobline buying what's that? 4 minutes, excuse me. Hoobline buying what's now Coppola, but was then Beaulieu, and Coca-Cola bought Behringer's. Anyway, different corporations came in and bought the old family wineries, and that brought different jobs and people. Now, when I was a kid in the 60s, my dad always thought no one can come back to the valley because there's no jobs. Well, the other side of it is now with the wine industry, there's tons of jobs. People can go to college, get a degree, come back, be an attorney or a marketing expert or wine oriented, whatever, in many, many jobs. We used to just be a pass through for the those days they were called verseros, for the farm workers. They would just come through us and stay here for 3 years and then go up to Yuba City or go wherever, and they would just where the crops were. But because of the vitality of the vineyard business, we have an amazingly terrific Hispanic community up here now, where people own shops and own vineyards and own businesses, and that's worked out tremendously well because of the wealth. But also it's brought the glamour, the showbiz, the Hollywood, the athletes, and all that sort of
Michelin
stuff.
star chefs, the Meadowoods, the Four Seasons, there's all these new developments sort of coming in that are really attracting that higher end crowd.
Yeah, so we've become really a tourist destination as opposed to a farming community. And that's, for those of us that have been around a long time, that's very sad, but it has its pluses, as Cody said.
Yeah.
You got great restaurants up here and and the people are interesting. I mean, people that go into the wine business have major egos, which isn't bad. I mean, no, I mean, if you're going to put your name on a product and you're going to be tested anyway, so that's probably the biggest change.
Interesting. That leads us to our final question of the day. Do you think future generations will follow in your footsteps?
Go ahead.
I've got 3 young boys, and I'm the youngest of 3. I'm the only one here. I would hope so. I think it's a lovely place. When you grow up here, you think it's way too small, and you go to a school with 400 kids that you've known since you were born, and you think you'll never come back, and then you grow up and realize that it's a wonderful place to live and raise children and stuff. But it's expensive. It's hard to start a family here, and for young people of my generation and below, it's you've got to come from that tech money or that family money, or and
it's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
I mean, the prices.
You can't buy a house for under $2 million that's
Yeah.
livable. So it's you got to work hard if you want to, or you got to stay here and not leave.
Yeah, I doubt Cody's kids will go into the business. It'll just be too difficult for them to raise a family up here. But we hope.
But we
for
hope
it.
so.
Yeah.
They like to come with me to see houses. We go look at houses, and they call them the dream homes and ask when we can buy one. So.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, very nice.
Could you find a nice little fixer-upper for $1.5 million, maybe?
Yeah, for 1.5.
Yeah, we did that when we moved here, and then then there was no power, and there was no fire insurance, and there was Yeah, we bought up in the hills when we first moved here, and now we are patiently seeing what happens with interest rates, and we are happily living here, waiting to take over my folks' house. I'm just kidding.
Well, thank you very much for talking to us. I look forward to seeing your show, your podcast and all. And I think that this type of interest in the Valley can only be positive for all of us that live here.
And for anyone that's listening.
Yes, that's true.
I hope I remembered to put film in the camera.
That's right.